This is Past the Rock.
And I'll go ahead and pick up this tough subject to start because mere hours after we finished recording, before we even posted last week's news started flooding in about Marshawn Nealand, the tragic sudden passing of him. Which look, it's been a week. I'm sure it's been covered by absolutely everybody, so we don't need to get into all the nitty gritty of it. But obviously, there's some mental health concerns going on. We're still kind of getting reports in about the full context of the story. I'm not sure of the full timeline because I know that there was a point where he's sending out kind of goodbye texts, and so someone asked for a welfare check, but I don't know if that's before or after the incident where he was supposed to be being pulled over, so I'm not sure.
Feels like logically I'm gonna guess before here.
Well, yeah, I'm just confused about the welfare or the wellness check part of it, but
well, it seems like I don't know. I don't want to assume here too much, but it feels like it was likely that his girlfriend or spouse, however, was potentially the one who called the welfare check-in.
And yeah, and we learned today through Brian Schottenheimer's words that she's pregnant. So they've got they're trying to raise some money to help them out. And obviously Dak's got a pretty close kind of tangential vibe with this, both in losing and Dak's brother.
Solomon Thomas also had a similar situation. So there was a couple of Cowboys that were the subject, more or less.
There are no silver linings, but if you had to grab at straws to try to find one, the fact the Cowboys did have a bye week this week is probably the best thing for everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
to even begin to process any of this.
No, it's a weird reset in a way because the football product has been so just not desirable in a lot of ways, and I don't really think any of this has to do with the football product or anything.
No,
Marshawn lost his mother about a year ago, and then you can kind of find a bit of a situation there. But I mean, as far as the kid goes, it does make me worry more about the culture of football and the way that coaches choose to play players. Because Marshawn is, by all accounts, seems like there's not any sort of real negativity. There doesn't seem even to be much erratic behavior. The kid busted his ass to be a nothing recruit to being a really good player at Western Michigan before going second in the second round for the Cowboys, and they were really excited about him. And he had shown quite a bit of talent, and maybe it wasn't very consistent, but now you kind of understand where that situation might have been impacting things. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you, from a surface level, from what we get to see, it's like, this looks like a great life. This looks like a great kid with a great future. And then this happens and it leaves you with a lot of questions about a lot of things. And honestly, for me, it's a lot of people are going to turn it into more of Marshawn's story. And I don't want to take him away from it. But for me, it does concern me with the lack of progression in the NFL locker room, or at least how I feel like we perceive it. I don't know that these guys as a whole, especially the younger ones, are taking the head trauma as seriously. And I don't know that it's fair to blame this on head trauma either, but
I think there's a lot of circumstances that can basically add up to all of this. Like you're saying, right? Because head trauma, no joke. We don't understand right now. Like, we know what post-career athlete brain will look like. Those who have been affected by CTE, we don't know what it looks like in the moment and how it's affecting them, right? At a psychological
we also know
level.
that CTE can affect people who have played as young as just peewee and never a day in college.
Yeah, exactly. And that as well. And I think there's a lot of circumstances that could have led to all of this, right? From what you're saying, there's a lot, like some of the underlying things that we don't think about, from culture in the locker room, right? It's like this tough guy, grind out, just
even in a locker room with a guy like Dak Prescott, who's
Exactly.
very openly,
because
mental health.
Yeah, and for somebody who, and I want to focus on that for 1 second, right? So for somebody like Dak, right, prominent player in the locker room, one of the faces of the league, and you think, well, if this guy's out in the open talking about his vulnerability with mental health issues and how losing somebody close to him, has affected him in his personal life, and he's being open and vulnerable about it. Surely that opens that lane up for everybody else. But at the same time, that could also be working against him because, like, hey, this is Dak. He can say that. He can be vulnerable. Not you. You need to earn that. That could be one of those things that is embedded into football culture, how these coaches talk to these players as well. Sure, that's not all coaches. That's not all organizations, right? There might be organizations who have set themselves up to really give their athletes a chance to be vulnerable, to be able to explore their mental health in a safe environment during or after the season concludes. But those are things that we don't hear about. And if those do exist, right, it would behoove the league to highlight that, especially considering what just happened, right? And this isn't the first instance that we've had a player had this happen, right? Famously, I believe it was Junior Seau, if I'm not mistaken. No, he was no longer in the league.
This all really began with was it Dave Duerson was the corner for Chicago from the 85 Bears. I remember being a kid and I'd never really known that much about the 85 Bears other than they were a good defense, right? I didn't really know who all consist. I think Singletary because he's a Waco guy. But like other than that, I really didn't know much about him. And Dave Duerson was like their starting corner, if I remember correctly. And then he was the first one publicly. I believe he committed suicide, and they found a bunch of like evidence. And
yeah, he self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. And then he had requested his brain be sent to Boston University.
Yeah, and so that was really the first time that it was really put on the map. I mean, maybe, and obviously it had to have been a factor prior, but Dave Duerson was the first time that we had.
Yeah. And it's been a while since we had a situation like this. And I think maybe the NFL has been kind of hoping that this hasn't something that fans would think about, players would think about, but now things like this happen with Marshawn Kneeland. And one thing that I think that I wanted to also bring up for the general audience, because you mentioned it earlier, like, on the outside, they're living this great life. They're professional athletes. They play in front of millions of people on television, thousands every, 16, 17 weeks out of the year, all this good stuff. And, they're making lots of money, but what we don't see is the pressure to perform, right? We don't live these guys' lives. A lot of these guys, they are on the razor's edge of trying to keep this career, which is very fleeting. It's 3-4 year average for the lifespan of an NFL player's career, right? So you take that into consideration. You take everything that's happened prior to them even making it to the league, and we don't know what a lot of these guys' home lives were like prior to them joining the league, when they're in the league. So you have all of these external pressures on top of their own pressure to succeed, perform to the best of their abilities, contribute to hopefully a winning team. And if they're losing, a losing locker room can spiral in itself, be a very negative place to be at. So can winning locker rooms as well. I don't want to, discredit that either. I'm just saying there are a lot of circumstances that people don't think about when we get a story like Marshawn Kneeland, right? And the mother passing away. We don't know what his own thoughts were like being in the spotlight, being a Dallas Cowboy, being on the most covered team in the league. We know that they are constantly in the news cycle, for better or for worse, for those players in the organization, in the locker room. That's the thing. We just don't know. And so we should always give these players some grace when it comes to them opening up about their mental health. Guys like Dak for the Dallas Cowboys, for example. I know AJ Brown, when he was with the Tennessee Titans, he was out and open about his own struggles. Lane Johnson with the Philadelphia Eagles as well. And I'm sure there have been other players around the league who've been trying to spotlight mental health. Now it's up to the league to really step to the plate and really promote this, because you don't want to have situations like this anymore.
Yeah, and I don't want to take away from any of what y'all put out there. But I will say specifically with someone who actually is experiencing some kind of daily mental health struggle, first you can offer all the branches you want, you can hold your hand out as much as you want. Some people just aren't going to take it, because that's what the crippling anxiety and fear and depression do for them. So even without the factors of the pressures of the game, sometimes people are just depressed. I remember being 18 or 19 and trying to talk about it with one of my friends, and he asked, "What are you depressed about?" I'm like, that's not like, but if you've never experienced anything like that, if you don't know anything like that, that's a valid question that the only answer I have is
no.
nothing.
And that's what I was going to say is like, I think the answer is all of the things you guys have said, but really the most important one is, especially for these NFL locker rooms, but it can apply to anything, is not pretending to be the expert yourself. Yes, opening the communication is great, but actually just simply encouraging the help with experts is the best path forward, right? Like,
yeah, I think
ultimately the thing is the NFL locker room is competitive. Life is competitive. People have a lot of things going on in their life. It really is a service that is needed by professionals in this world. So that's just the understanding I think people have to get to.
Yeah.
And if they get to that, I think it leaves the world open to better situations where maybe this can be prevented. And of course, maybe it just can't.
And then, there's also the factor of maybe, the CTE, just like certain drugs can do, are going to exacerbate a problem, not necessarily create it, but exacerbate it.
And to kind of follow up on what you were talking about a little bit ago, Patrick, when it comes to depression, because I myself have struggled with it myself. Sometimes and I've known many people who, deal with their own forms of anxiety, depression, everything along, the mental health spectrum. Sometimes it can just be as simple as a chemical imbalance that you were born with and you have to live with, right? And then, of course, life happens and that can exacerbate that right there, and it can spiral, right? And so I just want to put that out there for people who may not be familiar with, all of the causes of depression and just any kind of mental health disorder out there. Sometimes it can be as simple as, a chemical imbalance that you're born with, or it can stem from traumatic brain injuries. It can stem from traumatic moments in somebody's life. There's a myriad of causes to this, and I just want people to be aware of it. And, that way, if you're aware, you can become a little bit more educated about what people are going through, and, you can offer support to others who may not be able to support themselves.
Or at least just like maybe sort of kind of empathize and grasp on your own,
Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
I don't need people reaching out to me as much as I just want you to like get it and not.
Yeah.
Then we don't have to deal with it.
I think it's funny too, because I come from a long history of suck it up hillbilly culture, right? And I think the funniest part is that often what I understand about mental health help is that you do end up finding that exact mental space, but through a much more logical place where your brain can actually follow it, where it's not just saying a phrase or just, ignoring something. You literally just kind of move on from it, therefore sort of do the thing you were always thinking you were doing. So that's the other funny part, is there's a bit of an irony to the suck it up story version of it, but it is a lineage a lot of us come from, and football's entrenched in it heavy. So it's why I think it was important here.
This is Pass the Rock.